Almost every riff that made you want to pick up a guitar in the first place is built from one of a small handful of technique categories, repeated and combined in new ways. You do not need perfect pitch or 20 years of theory to start writing riffs that hit the same way. You need to understand what these techniques are actually doing mechanically, and today I am breaking down the 4 that show up again and again across rock history. The first is palm-muted power chords, and it is the backbone of hard rock and metal riffing from the late 1960s onward. A power chord is just the root and the fifth, 2 notes, no third, which means it has no major or minor quality on its own, only raw harmonic weight. Palm muting means resting the edge of your picking hand lightly against the strings near the bridge, which chokes the sustain and turns a ringing chord into a tight, percussive chunk. The technique detail that separates a convincing palm-muted riff from a weak one is muting pressure consistency. Too light and the notes still ring out, too heavy and you lose the pitch entirely and it just sounds like a thud. Bands built entire riffing vocabularies around alternating between muted chunks and brief unmuted accents, because that contrast between choked and ringing is what creates rhythmic punch. The second is the tritone, an interval so dissonant that medieval music theorists reportedly nicknamed it the devil's interval, and it is the exact interval most associated with the birth of heavy metal riffing in the early 1970s. Mechanically, it is 3 whole steps between 2 notes, and on guitar it is dead simple to play, same fret on 2 adjacent strings, skip 1 string. That physical simplicity is part of why it spread so fast through the genre. It requires almost no technical skill to play, but it creates a sound that is instantly unsettling and heavy, which is exactly why bands built foundational riffs around it rather than more consonant, comfortable-sounding intervals. The third is the open-string drone riff, where a moving chord or note pattern rings out over a constantly repeating open low string, usually the low E. This technique is everywhere in classic rock and hard rock because it solves a specific problem. It lets a riff sound huge and full even when only 1 or 2 fingers are actually moving, since the ringing open string fills out the low end constantly underneath. The technique detail that makes this work is precise right-hand control, hitting the open string cleanly on the correct beats while your fretting hand moves through the higher notes, without the 2 parts bleeding into each other sloppily. The fourth is call-and-response phrasing, borrowed directly from blues and adapted into rock riffing constantly. A short phrase plays, then a silence, then a second phrase answers it, almost like a musical question and reply. This is a phrasing technique more than a mechanical one, but it is just as learnable. The discipline is in the silence, resisting the urge to fill every beat with notes, because the gap between phrases is doing as much work as the notes themselves. Riffs that use this structure tend to feel conversational and memorable specifically because your ear naturally waits for the answer to the question the first phrase just asked. Here is the practical exercise that ties all 4 together. Pick 1 low string, and using only palm-muted 8th notes, create a 2-bar rhythm using nothing but silence and muted chunks, no melody yet. Then add a tritone accent once per phrase, same fret, skip a string, timed on an unexpected beat rather than the obvious downbeat. Then let 1 note ring open and unmuted at the end of each phrase, so you get contrast between choked and open. Finally, leave a full beat of silence between your 2-bar phrases, so the riff breathes instead of running together into 1 wall of notes. What you will notice immediately is that none of these 4 techniques requires advanced music theory or blazing speed. Palm muting is a right-hand pressure skill. The tritone is a 2-finger shape. Open string drones are a coordination skill between both hands. Call and response is a discipline around silence. The riffs that became genre-defining were rarely the most technically difficult ones to physically play. They were the ones where a simple technique was executed with total rhythmic conviction and repeated until it became unforgettable. If you want more breakdowns of the actual mechanics behind the riffs you grew up on, subscribe and hit the bell, because I cover a new one every week. And tell me in the comments, which of these 4 techniques do you want a full riff writing lesson on next? See you in the next one.